The rain fell hard on the colony world of Verax 7, and it showed no sign of stopping anytime soon. Marcus Chen pulled his work jacket tighter around his shoulders as he stepped out of the construction site, his boots splashing through muddy puddles that had formed along the unpaved road. He was 52 years old, and he had spent the last 3 decades building things, first on Earth, then on Mars, and now here on this frontier world at the edge of human space. Tonight had been a long shift, and his bones ached with the kind of tiredness that only hard labor could bring. The streets of the small colonial town were empty, which was not surprising given the weather. Most species in the galaxy avoided cold rain the way humans avoided open flames. The Volari found it painful on their sensitive skin, and the Crethian traders refused to leave their ships when moisture levels rose above a certain point. But humans were different, and Marcus had always found something peaceful about walking through a storm. The rain reminded him of his childhood in Seattle, of nights spent watching lightning dance across Puget Sound, while his grandmother told him stories about the old country. He missed Earth sometimes, but he had made his peace with the stars long ago. The colonial outpost was still small, just a few dozen buildings clustered around a central hub where the transport ships landed. Marcus and his crew were here to change that, to turn this muddy frontier town into a proper city that could house thousands of settlers. It was good work, honest work, and he took pride in every beam they raised and every foundation they poured. He was thinking about tomorrow's schedule when he heard the sound. It was faint at first, almost lost beneath the drumming of rain on metal rooftops. But Marcus had spent his whole life working in noisy environments, and he had learned to pick out the sounds that mattered. This sound mattered. It was a whimper, low and broken, coming from somewhere to his left. He stopped walking and turned his head, trying to locate the source. The alley between 2 storage units was dark, filled with discarded shipping containers and broken equipment that nobody had bothered to clean up yet. Marcus hesitated for just a moment before stepping into the shadows. His eyes took a few seconds to adjust, and when they did, he felt his breath catch in his throat. There was a creature huddled against the far wall, pressed into the narrow gap between a waste unit and a stack of empty crates. At first, Marcus thought it might be some kind of local animal, but then he saw the scales that gleamed faintly in the dim light, and he recognized the shape of wings folded tight against a slender body. It was a Corvani. Marcus had never seen one in person before, but he knew them from the galactic databases and from the stories that traders told in the colony bar. They were a proud species, dragon-like in appearance, with long necks and powerful tails, and eyes that could supposedly see across vast distances. They kept to themselves and rarely interacted with other species, and they were known throughout the galaxy for their fierce independence and their refusal to accept help from anyone. But this Corvani was not fierce or proud. This Corvani was small, far smaller than the images Marcus had seen, which meant it was probably young. Its scales were dull and flaking, and its body was thin enough that he could count the ridges of its spine beneath its hide. It was shivering so hard that its teeth made a clicking sound, and when it lifted its head at the sound of his approach, Marcus saw something that made his heart ache. Its eyes were clouded white, completely covered by a milky film that caught no light at all. The creature was blind. "Hey there," Marcus said, softly, keeping his voice low and gentle, the way he would with a frightened animal. The Corvani flinched at the sound, pressing itself harder against the wall, as if it could somehow disappear into the metal. A low hiss escaped its throat, but there was no real threat behind it, just fear and exhaustion and the desperate instinct to survive. Marcus held up his hands, even though the creature could not see the gesture. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, speaking slowly and clearly, in case it understood standard. "My name is Marcus, and I just want to help." The Corvani did not respond, but its hissing faded into something that sounded almost like a sob. Marcus had seen a lot of things in his years among the stars, but he had never seen anything quite so broken as this creature in front of him. He thought about what he knew of Corvani culture, about their pride and their isolation, and he wondered what could have brought one of their young so far from its own world, far from home in such terrible condition. The answer, he suspected, was nothing good. The rain was getting heavier, and Marcus could see the creature shivering harder with each passing moment. Its body temperature was probably dropping, and if it stayed out here much longer, it might not survive the night. He had a choice to make, and he made it without much thought at all. Marcus pulled off his thermal jacket, the expensive one that regulated body heat and kept out moisture, and he stepped slowly toward the Corvani. The creature tensed, but did not flee, perhaps too weak to run anymore. "Easy now," Marcus murmured as he knelt beside it. "I am just going to put this around you, okay? It will keep you warm." He draped the jacket over the Corvani's trembling shoulders, and the creature went very still. Its blind eyes turned toward him, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Marcus could feel the cold rain soaking through his shirt, but he did not care. "There you go," he said gently. "That is better, right?" The Corvani made a small sound, something between confusion and wonder, as if it could not understand why this stranger was giving it warmth instead of chasing it away. Marcus understood that confusion, and it made him sad. "Come on," he said, rising to his feet and offering his hand, even though he knew the creature could not see it. "I live just a few blocks from here, and I have food and heat and a dry place to sleep. Will you come with me?" The Corvani did not move at first, and Marcus thought it might refuse. But then, slowly, painfully, it began to uncurl from its hiding spot. Its legs shook as it tried to stand, and when it stumbled, Marcus caught it without thinking. The creature weighed almost nothing, and he could feel bones beneath its scales where there should have been muscle. It had been starving for a long time. "I have got you," Marcus said as the Corvani leaned against him, too exhausted to resist. "Just hold on to me, and we will get through this together." They made their way out of the alley and into the rain, the human foreman and the blind alien dragon walking slowly through the empty streets toward a warmth that one of them had never known. Marcus did not know what challenges tomorrow would bring, and he did not know how he was going to explain this to anyone. But as he felt the small creature trembling against his side, trusting him, even though it had no reason to trust anyone, he knew that he had made the right choice. Some things in life were simple, and this was one of them. You did not walk away from someone who needed help. You just did not. The rain kept falling, and Marcus kept walking, and somewhere in the darkness, a blind dragon began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe was not as cruel as it had seemed. Marcus lived in a small habitat unit on the edge of the colony, one of the standard-issue homes that the company provided for senior workers. It was not much to look at, just 3 rooms and a tiny bathroom, but it was warm and dry and safe, and right now, that was all that mattered. The Corvani stumbled through the door behind him, her clawed feet clicking against the floor as she tried to find her balance in this unfamiliar space. Marcus had started thinking of the creature as female, though he was not entirely sure why. Something about the way she moved, perhaps, or the pitch of her voice when she made those small, frightened sounds. "Okay," Marcus said, guiding her toward the couch in the main room. "You can sit here. It is soft and comfortable, and I am going to get you something to eat." The home's AI system flickered to life as soon as they entered, its calm voice filling the room. "Warning, biological contamination detected. Unregistered alien species present. Recommend immediate quarantine protocols." Marcus waved his hand at the nearest sensor. Override authorization Chen 7749. Stand down all contamination protocols. Override accepted, the AI replied. However, I must note that housing an unregistered alien species may violate colonial regulations. I said stand down, Marcus interrupted, and the AI fell silent. The Corvani had frozen at the sound of the artificial voice, her blind eyes darting around as if trying to locate the threat. Marcus knelt beside her and touched her shoulder gently. It is just my home computer, he explained. It talks sometimes, but it cannot hurt you. You are safe here, I promise. She did not seem to understand his words, but something in his tone must have reached her, because she slowly relaxed and sank onto the couch. Her thin body nearly disappeared into the cushions, and she pulled his thermal jacket tighter around herself like a shield. Marcus went to the kitchen and started heating up some soup, simple vegetable broth that he hoped would be safe for Corvani biology. He also pulled up the colony's database on his tablet and began searching for information about her species, trying to learn what she could and could not eat. The data was limited, as the Corvani rarely shared information about themselves, but he found enough to feel confident that the soup would not hurt her. When he brought the bowl back to the couch, she flinched away from him before catching the smell of the food. Her nostrils flared, and a low rumble came from her throat, not a threatening sound, but something closer to desperate hope. Pause, here, Marcus said, pressing the warm bowl into her clawed hands. Pause, drink this. It will help. She hesitated for just a moment before bringing the bowl to her lips and drinking deeply. The soup was gone in seconds, and she made a sound that might have been a plea for more. Marcus smiled sadly and went back to the kitchen. Over the next few hours, he fed her 4 more bowls of soup, 2 protein bars, and half a loaf of bread that he had been saving for himself. She ate everything he gave her, and with each bite, he could see a little more strength returning to her body. When she finally stopped eating, she curled up on the couch and fell asleep almost immediately, exhaustion pulling her under like a wave. Marcus sat in the chair across from her and watched her sleep, wondering what he had gotten himself into. The next few days were difficult, as neither of them could understand the other very well at first. Marcus purchased a translation device from a trader passing through the colony, and after some adjustments, began to interpret the Corvani language with reasonable accuracy. That was when he finally learned her story, and it broke his heart. Her name was something his human tongue could not quite pronounce, a series of harmonic tones that the translator rendered as Sora Eth Khan. Marcus simplified it to Storm in his own mind, a name that reminded him of the night he found her. She had been born blind, she told him, her milky eyes a defect that appeared sometimes in Corvani clutches. Among her people, sight was everything. Their culture revolved around visual art, visual communication, visual displays of status and power. A blind Corvani was considered cursed, a burden on the clan, a mistake that the universe had made. Her parents had cared for her in secret for the first few years of her life, but eventually the clan elders discovered her existence. They gave her family a choice: abandon the defective child or face exile themselves. Parents chose their clan, and Storm was taken to a distant trade station and left there to die. They said the universe would correct its error, Storm explained through the translator, her voice flat and empty. They said I would not suffer long. But Storm had not died. She had survived on scraps and charity, hiding in the shadows of space stations and cargo holds, moving from world to world whenever someone discovered her and chased her away. She had been alone for nearly 2 standard years, fighting to stay alive in a galaxy that did not want her. Why? She asked Marcus on the 3rd night, when she was finally strong enough to sit up without help. Why do you waste your food on me? Why do you give me shelter? What do you want from me? Marcus thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "I do not want anything from you," he said honestly. "I saw you in that alley, and you were hurt and scared and alone, and I could not just walk away. That is not who I am." Storm tilted her head, confusion clear in her expression, even though her eyes showed nothing. "But I have no value to you," she said. "I cannot see, I cannot work, I cannot give you anything in return. Among my people, charity without purpose is weakness, and weakness is death." "Well," Marcus said with a small shrug, "I am not one of your people. I am human, and we do things differently." "How?" Storm asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice now, as if she was trying to understand a puzzle that made no sense. Marcus thought about how to explain something that felt so natural to him, so obvious that he had never needed to put it into words before. "We believe that everyone has value," he said finally. "Not because of what they can do or what they can give us, but just because they exist. Every person, every being, deserves kindness and care, especially when they are hurting. That is what it means to be human." Storm was quiet for a long time after that, her clawed hands gripping the blanket he had given her. "I do not understand," she admitted at last, "but I think I would like to." Marcus smiled at her, even though she could not see it. "That is okay," he said gently. "You have time to figure it out. You are safe here, and you can stay as long as you want. This is your home now, if you will have it." Something changed in Storm's face then, a crack in the wall she had built around herself, a glimpse of the scared child hiding beneath the survivor's mask. "Home," she repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. "I have never had a home." "Well," Marcus said, reaching out to pat her shoulder the way he would comfort any frightened youngster. "Now you do." The rain continued to fall outside, drumming against the roof of the small habitat unit. But inside, it was warm and dry and safe. Storm curled up on the couch with her blanket wrapped around her, and for the first time in 2 years, she fell asleep without fear. Marcus watched her for a while, then got up to make more soup. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, he knew. But for tonight, this was enough. A warm home, a full belly, and the first fragile thread of trust between two very different beings. It was a start, and sometimes that is all it needs to be. A start was all you needed. Word spread through the colony faster than Marcus had expected. By the end of the first week, everyone seemed to know that the construction foreman had taken in a Corvani, and the reactions were mixed at best. Some people thought he was crazy, risking his job and his safety for an alien creature that had no business being here. Others were simply curious, wondering what had possessed a practical man like Marcus Chen to do something so impulsive. His crew was the most vocal about their concerns. "Boss, are you sure about this?" asked Dmitri, his assistant foreman, during their morning meeting at the construction site. "The Corvani have a reputation, you know. They say they are territorial and aggressive, and they do not like other species getting close to them." "She is just a kid," Marcus replied, not looking up from the blueprints spread across his desk. "A scared, blind kid who was thrown away by her own people. She is not dangerous." "Maybe not now," Dmitri pressed, "but what happens when she gets bigger? What happens when her instincts kick in?" "I am just saying, boss. You should think about this." Marcus did look up then, and there was something hard in his eyes that made Dmitri take a step back. "I have thought about it," Marcus said quietly, "and I have made my decision. Storm stays with me, and that is the end of the discussion." The crew exchanged glances but said nothing more. They had worked with Marcus long enough to know when he would not be moved, and this was clearly one of those times. But the whispers continued, and Marcus knew he needed to do something to change people's minds. So he invited them to meet her. It started with Dmitri, who came by Marcus's habitat unit one evening with a six-pack of beer and a suspicious expression. Storm was sitting on the floor near the heating unit, her favorite spot in the house, running her claws over a collection of smooth stones that Marcus had gathered for her from the construction site. She liked to sort them by texture and weight, a task that kept her occupied for hours at a time. "Storm," Marcus said gently, "this is Dmitri. He works with me, and he wanted to say hello." Storm's head turned toward the sound of the unfamiliar voice, and she went very still, her body tensing with the instinct to flee or fight. But she had learned to trust Marcus over the past week, and if he said this person was safe, then maybe they were. "Hello," she said through the translator, her voice soft and uncertain. Dmitri stared at her for a long moment, taking in her thin frame, her clouded eyes, the way she held herself, like she was ready to run at any moment. Whatever he had expected from a Corvani, this was clearly not it. "Hello," he said at last, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Marcus talks about you a lot. He says you are good at organizing things." Storm tilted her head, surprised by the comment. "I sort his work tablets for him," she admitted. "He cannot find anything on his own." Dmitri let out a bark of laughter that made Storm flinch, though she relaxed when she realized it was not a threatening sound. "That sounds like the boss, all right," he said. "The man can build a city from scratch, but he loses his keys 3 times a day." Marcus rolled his eyes but did not deny it. "Just for that, you are buying the next round," he said, gesturing for Dmitri to sit down. The evening passed more easily than Marcus had hoped. Dmitri was awkward at first, unsure how to talk to someone who could not see his expressions or body language. But Storm was patient, and she had gotten good at reading voices and tones. By the time the beer was gone, something had shifted between them. Dmitri left with a promise to come back soon, and he kept that promise. Word spread through the crew that the Corvani was not what they had expected, and one by one they started showing up at Marcus's door. Tara came first, a welder with calloused hands and a soft heart, bringing a thermal blanket that she had modified to fit Storm's unusual body shape. Then came Jorge, the electrician, with a box of nutrient packs that he had ordered from a Xeno specialist 3 systems away. "I looked up what Corvani eat," he explained, looking embarrassed by his own thoughtfulness. "Figured she could use some proper food instead of that soup you keep making, boss." Marcus accepted the gift with a grateful nod, and Storm accepted the food with something approaching wonder. "Why are they doing this?" she asked Marcus later that night, after Jorge had gone. "They do not know me. I have done nothing for them. Why do they bring me gifts?" Marcus sat down beside her and thought about how to explain something that felt so natural to him, but so foreign to her. "Because they are good people," he said finally. "And good people help each other, especially when someone is in need. You needed help, Storm, and they want to be part of giving it to you." "But I cannot repay them," Storm insisted, and there was distress in her voice now, the old shame of being a burden rising up to choke her. "I have nothing to offer." "You do not need to offer anything," Marcus said firmly. "That is not how this works. We help you because you need it, not because we expect something back. That is what being part of a community means." Storm was quiet for a long time, her claws clicking softly against the smooth stones in her lap. "Among my people," she said at last, "resources are limited, and every member of the clan must contribute. Those who cannot contribute are left behind, because survival demands sacrifice. I was taught that this is the way of the universe." "Maybe that is the way of your people," Marcus replied gently. "But it is not the way of mine. Humans have survived not by leaving each other behind, but by lifting each other up. We are stronger together than we are apart, and that includes you." The words hung in the air between them, and Storm seemed to be turning them over in her mind, examining them from every angle. "I do not know if I can believe that," she admitted. "But I want to. I want to understand why you do what you do." Marcus smiled at her, even though she could not see it. "Then watch us," he said. "Watch how we treat each other and how we treat you. Let our actions speak for themselves." Over the following weeks, that is exactly what Storm did. She watched, or rather listened, as the construction crew continued to visit, bringing gifts and conversation and the simple warmth of human companionship. She listened as they laughed and argued and supported each other through hard days and long nights. She listened as they included her in their circle without hesitation, as if she had always belonged there. And slowly, carefully, she began to believe. Not all at once, and not without doubt, but belief was growing in her heart like a seed finding sunlight after years in darkness. These humans were different from anything she had ever known, and maybe, just maybe, their way was better than the one she had been taught. The day Tara came back with the sensor harness was the day everything changed. It was a simple device, really. Just a series of spatial sensors mounted on a lightweight frame, fit around Storm's chest. The sensors emitted gentle vibrations when they detected objects nearby, creating a kind of echolocation that allowed Storm to navigate without sight. "I built it in my off hours," Tara explained, her voice gruff with embarrassment. "It is not perfect, but I thought it might help." Storm put on the harness with trembling claws, and when she took her first steps without stumbling into furniture, she made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "I can feel the room," she whispered. "I can feel where everything is." Tara smiled, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Yeah, well, do not get too excited. It needs a lot of work still." But Storm was already moving through the habitat unit, her steps growing more confident with each passing moment. And when she turned back to Tara, there were tears streaming down her scaled face. "Thank you," she said, and the words carried more weight than any Marcus had ever heard. This was the moment, he realized, when Storm stopped being a refugee and started becoming family. And family, among humans, was everything. The Corvani diplomatic vessel arrived without warning, dropping out of hyperspace above Verit 7 like a predator descending on unsuspecting prey. It was a beautiful ship, all sleek lines and gleaming scales, built in the distinctive style of the Dragon people, who valued aesthetics almost as much as they valued strength. The colonial administrator, a nervous man named Director Hollins, nearly fell over himself, rushing to greet the delegation when they landed. "Ambassador Kethvoron," he stammered, bowing low before the imposing Corvani, who led the group. "We were not expecting you. To what do we owe this honor?" The ambassador was everything Storm was not. Tall, powerful, his scales shimmering with health, and his golden eyes sharp with intelligence. He looked down at the human with barely concealed contempt, as if addressing an insect that had somehow learned to speak. "We are here to discuss trade agreements with your colony," Kethvoron replied, his voice rumbling through the translator like distant thunder. "But we have also received disturbing reports about a member of our species living among you." Director Hollins's face went pale. "You mean the juvenile that Marcus Chen took in?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "I was not aware that this would be a matter of diplomatic concern." "A clanless Corvani surviving on alien charity is always a matter of concern," the ambassador said coldly. "It is a stain on our honor, and it must be corrected. You will bring this creature to us immediately, so that she may face proper judgment." Marcus learned about the delegation 3 hours later, when Director Hollins summoned him to the Colonial Administration building. The meeting room was cold and formal, with the ambassador and 2 other Corvani officials seated on one side of the table, and Hollins seated on the other, looking like he wished he was anywhere else in the galaxy. "Mr. Chen," the director began, "I am sure you understand the delicate nature of this situation. The Corvani are an important trading partner, and we cannot afford to— You want me to hand over Storm, Marcus interrupted, his voice flat. Hollins flinched at the bluntness, but nodded. The ambassador has made it clear that her presence here is an insult to their people. If we return her, we can avoid a diplomatic incident and maintain our good relations with— No. The word fell like a hammer, silencing everyone in the room. Ambassador Keth Voron leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowing dangerously. You refuse? He asked, as if the very concept was beyond his comprehension. You dare refuse a formal request from the Corvani Collective? Marcus met the ambassador's gaze without flinching. He was not a diplomat or a soldier. He was just a man who built things, and his hands were calloused from decades of honest work. But there was steel in his spine that had nothing to do with his job title. I refuse, he confirmed. Storm is under my protection, and she is not going anywhere. The ambassador's scales rippled with barely contained fury. By what right do you speak for her? He demanded. You are not her kin, not her clan. You have no authority over a Corvani citizen. She stopped being your citizen when you threw her away, Marcus replied, and there was anger in his voice now, cold and controlled, but unmistakable. I found her dying in the rain because you people decided she was worthless. I fed her and kept her warm and gave her a home when nobody else in this whole galaxy cared whether she lived or died. If that does not give me the right to speak for her, then nothing does. Director Hollins looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Mr. Chen, please, he said weakly. There are larger considerations at play here. Our colony depends on trade relations with— I do not care about trade relations, Marcus cut in. I care about a child who has already been abandoned once. I am not going to let it happen again. Ambassador Keth Voron rose to his full height, towering over the seated humans like a creature out of ancient myth. You do not understand what you are doing, he said, and there was something almost like warning in his voice. The female is defective. She was born blind, cursed by nature itself. Among our people, such creatures are cast out so that the clan may remain strong. This is not cruelty, it is mercy. Mercy? Marcus repeated, and he laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. You call abandoning a child mercy? You call leaving her to starve and freeze mercy? Where I come from, that is called murder, and I will not be a part of it. The ambassador's eyes flickered with something that might have been surprise. No one had ever spoken to him this way, certainly not a member of a lesser species, and he was not sure how to respond. There will be consequences for this, he said at last, falling back on threats when reason failed. Your colony cannot afford to make an enemy of the Corvani Collective. Maybe not, Marcus agreed, but I can afford to live with myself, and I could not do that if I handed over a scared kid to people who want to hurt her. So, do what you have to do, Ambassador, but Storm stays with me. The meeting ended without resolution, and Marcus returned home to find Storm waiting for him by the door. She had heard the rumors circulating through the colony. Impossible to keep secrets in a town this small, and she knew what was happening. You should give me to them, she said quietly, her blind eyes downcast. I do not want to cause trouble for you or your people. Marcus knelt down so that he was at her level, taking her clawed hands in his own. Listen to me, he said firmly. You are not trouble. You are family, and family does not give up on each other, no matter what. But the ambassador is powerful, Storm insisted, and there was fear in her voice, the old terror of being discarded rising up to consume her. If you defy him, he could hurt you, hurt everyone who has helped me. I am not worth that. Yes, you are, Marcus said, and there was no doubt in his voice, no hesitation. You are worth everything, Storm. Everything. Storm was silent for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, Her voice was barely a whisper. "No one has ever thought I was worth anything before." Marcus pulled her into a hug, careful of her wings and her scales, holding her tight, the way he would hold his own child if he had one. "Then everyone else was wrong," he said, "and I am going to prove it to them." The next few days were tense as the standoff continued. The ambassador refused to leave without Storm, and Marcus refused to surrender her. Director Hollins begged, pleaded, and threatened, but Marcus would not budge. The crew stood behind him, showing up at his door in shifts to make sure he was never alone, never vulnerable. And then something unexpected happened. Word of the confrontation spread beyond Verat 7, carried by traders and travelers to human colonies throughout the sector. Within a week, messages began pouring in, messages of support, messages of outrage, messages from people who had never met Storm, but who were furious at the thought of a child being punished for the crime of being born different. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through hundreds of communications, unable to believe what he was seeing. "What is happening?" Storm asked, sensing his surprise. Marcus looked up at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Humanity is happening," he said. "And the Corvani are about to learn what that means." The response from human space was unlike anything the Corvani had ever seen. Petitions bearing millions of signatures flooded the Galactic Council, demanding that the Dragon people be held accountable for their treatment of disabled citizens. Human merchant captains announced trade boycotts, refusing to transport Corvani goods until the situation was resolved. On a dozen different worlds, protesters gathered outside Corvani embassies with signs that read, "Storm stays, and humanity protects its own." But perhaps the most damaging blow came from within the Corvani collective itself. A scientist named Vera Keth-Sol, one of the few Corvani who studied other species, published an essay that spread across the galactic network like wildfire. In it, she condemned her own people's treatment of the disabled, calling it a relic of primitive times that had no place in civilized society. She held up Marcus Chen as an example of true honor. Nothing to gain, and everything to lose. But who chose to stand against an empire for the sake of one broken child? "We have always prided ourselves on our strength," Vera Keth-Sol wrote. "But what kind of strength requires the sacrifice of our most vulnerable? The humans call it compassion. Perhaps we should learn from them." The essay caused an uproar among the Corvani, sparking debates that had been suppressed for generations. For the first time in living memory, ordinary citizens began questioning the old ways, asking whether the traditions that had defined their culture were worth the suffering they caused. Ambassador Keth-Voren found himself caught between duty and doubt, facing pressure from all sides. In the end, it was not Marcus who won the standoff. It was the weight of an entire galaxy turning against a single act of cruelty. 3 weeks after the diplomatic vessel first arrived, the ambassador requested a final meeting with the colonial administrator and the human foreman. "We are withdrawing our demand," Keth-Voren announced, his voice stiff with wounded pride. "The female may remain here under human protection. The Corvani Collective has determined that we lack jurisdictional authority over a citizen who has been formally disowned by her clan." Director Hollins sagged with relief, but Marcus just stared at the ambassador with calm, steady eyes. "That is not good enough," he said. "I want it in writing that no Corvani will ever attempt to take her against her will. I want it guaranteed by the Galactic Council. And I want an apology." The ambassador's scales darkened with anger. "You ask too much, human," the ambassador said. "I am asking for the bare minimum," Marcus replied. "Storm deserves to live without fear, and I will not rest until she has that. You can either give it to her willingly, or you can watch your people's reputation crumble while the rest of the galaxy sees what you really are." The threat hung in the air between them, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, Ambassador Kethvoron inclined his head in what might have been the first gesture of respect he had ever shown a human. "You are a worthy adversary, Marcus Chen," he said. "Very well. You will have your guarantees, and the collective will issue a statement acknowledging that our past treatment of defective citizens was regrettable." It was not an apology, not really, but it was more than the Corvani had ever admitted before. Marcus accepted it with a nod, knowing that some battles took generations to win. The diplomatic vessel left Verat 7 the next day, and life in the colony slowly returned to normal, though normal had taken on a new meaning now. Storm was no longer a secret or a scandal. She was a symbol, a reminder of what humanity stood for, and what they were willing to fight for. And she was free. The months that followed were the happiest of Storm's young life. With Terra's help, she upgraded her sensor harness, refining the technology until it felt like a natural extension of her own senses. She learned to navigate not just Marcus's home, but the entire colony, moving through streets and buildings with a confidence she had never known before. More importantly, she found a purpose. It turned out that Storm's other senses, her hearing, her sense of smell, her ability to detect vibrations through her feet, were far sharper than any human's. When Marcus brought her to the construction site as an experiment, she discovered that she could hear things they could not. The subtle creak of stressed metal, the faint hum of unstable power conduits, the whisper of cracks forming deep within concrete foundations. "There is something wrong with this beam," she told Dmitri one afternoon, pressing her clawed hand against a support column. "I can hear it flexing. The stress is uneven." Dmitri scanned the beam with his equipment and found nothing. But when they brought in a specialist from the main city, the expert confirmed Storm's diagnosis. There was a manufacturing defect that would have caused the beam to fail within months. After that, no one questioned her presence on the site anymore. Storm became the crew's unofficial surveyor, using her extraordinary senses to detect problems that human technology missed. She saved lives without ever lifting a tool, and the workers who had once been wary of her came to value her as one of their own. She had a job, a purpose, a place in the world, and she had earned every bit of it. One evening, several months after the ambassador's departure, Storm found Marcus sitting on the porch of his habitat unit, watching the sun set over the growing city. She sat down beside him, her sensor harness humming softly as it mapped the space around her. "Something," she said. "Always," Marcus replied. "Why did you stop for me that night in the alley? You could not have known any of this would happen. You could not have known I would be worth saving, so why did you do it?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question the way he always did, carefully, thoroughly, as if he was examining a blueprint. "I did not know anything about you that night," he admitted. "I did not know your name or your story, or what you could do. All I knew was that you were cold and scared and alone, and I could help. That was enough." Storm tilted her head, still struggling to fully understand. But how could that be enough? How could you risk so much for a stranger? Marcus smiled, a small, warm expression that she could not see, but could somehow sense in the tone of his voice. "Because that is what humans do," he said simply. "We do not calculate the odds or weigh the benefits. We just see someone who needs help, and we help. It is not always smart, and it gets us into trouble sometimes, but it is who we are." Storm considered this for a long time, turning the idea over in her mind, the way she used to turn over the smooth stones Marcus had collected for her. "I think I understand now," she said at last. "Your people do not help because it benefits them. They help because helping is its own reward. To be kind is to be human." "Something like that," Marcus agreed. "We are not perfect, Storm, We make mistakes, we hurt each other, we fail more often than we succeed. But we keep trying, keep helping, keep building. That is the best thing about us. Storm reached out and took his hand, her claws gentle against his callous skin. "Thank you," she said, and the words carried the weight of everything she had survived, everything she had gained, everything she had become. "For what?" Marcus asked. "For seeing me," Storm replied, her blind eyes turning toward the sky, toward the stars where her people had abandoned her, and where humans had built her a home. "For seeing me when I could not see myself." Marcus squeezed her hand, saying nothing, because some moments did not need words. Above them the sky darkened into night, and the first stars began to appear. Distant suns circled by distant worlds, each one full of possibilities, full of people who might need help someday. And somewhere out there, the story of Marcus Chen and his blind dragon had already begun to spread, inspiring others to be a little kinder, a little braver, a little more human. Came again, that night, soft and warm with the turning of the seasons, but neither of them moved to go inside. They stayed on the porch together, the human foreman and the alien dragon, listening to the water fall, and thinking about all the things they had built. Not just buildings or cities, but something more important. A family, a community, a bond that crossed the vast distances between species and said, "You matter, you belong, you are home." And in the end, that was the most human thing of all.